There's something deeply wrong about lighthouses. Is it the isolation, the endless fog, the way they stand alone, watching the sea long after everyone else has gone? Tonight, we're diving into 3 real and truly disturbing lighthouse horror stories, each one stranger, darker, and more unsettling than the last. First, we go to the haunted cliffs of Maine, where a maintenance worker is sent to an abandoned lighthouse that shouldn't be functioning. But every night, the beam turns on, despite no power source. And deep in the stone walls, something is breathing. Something wants him to stay, forever. Second, we visit a decommissioned Scottish lighthouse where a research team sets out to study electromagnetic anomalies, only to discover that the fog isn't just weather. It's alive, and it remembers. One by one, they vanish, until the only thing left spinning is the light, and a warning carved in the walls that no one can explain. And finally, we'll uncover a long-buried Cold War mystery off the Alaskan coast, a cursed transmission, a rogue podcast crew, and a lighthouse that was never meant to be entered. This isn't just a haunting. It's a signal, a voice calling back from the void, and once you hear it, it never stops. If you think you're brave enough, don't blink, don't breathe, and whatever you do, don't skip ahead. These stories build, twist, and bury themselves in your mind. Let the light guide you, but just know, you may not leave the same. Story 1. The Keeper Who Never Left. They warned Jacob not to take the job. Not because he wasn't qualified. He was. Former Navy, stoic as stone, excellent eyesight, no family to miss him, all the things the Lighthouse Authority liked. No, the warnings came in whispers from fishermen at the docks, the kind of men who never spoke directly unless they'd had too much to drink or too little to lose. Gannet's Reach is cursed, one said, breath rank with rum. Lighthouse keeps its own, muttered another. Jacob laughed it off. He'd taken postings in worse conditions. Besides, this was just a temporary maintenance job, 2 weeks on the rock, replacing worn equipment, updating the radio array, checking structural integrity, then back to the mainland. Simple. But Gannet's Reach wasn't simple. It started before he even stepped foot inside. The boatman who dropped him off wouldn't make eye contact, just pointed a trembling finger toward the top of the lighthouse and muttered, "Don't listen to the fog." Jacob didn't even unpack right away. He climbed the spiral steps to the lantern room first, inspecting the Fresnel lens, checking the backup batteries, verifying the solar panels. Everything was in place, though the lens was foggy, coated with a film he couldn't quite wipe away. Still, the view was incredible. Crashing waves below. A cold wind that never stopped whispering. The whispering. That's what he noticed next. It wasn't the wind exactly, or the sea. It sounded like breathing. He chalked it up to acoustics, the waves echoing in the stone spiral of the tower. But at night the noise came again, louder, wet guttural inhales, as if someone, or something, was exhaling behind the walls. He slept in the keeper's quarters on the 2nd floor. There was a journal in the drawer, old, leather-bound, and brittle. He flipped through it on the 2nd night, thinking it belonged to a previous worker. But the ink looked fresh. It read, "The light must always turn. The sea must always see. Do not stop. Do not sleep when it breathes." The last few pages were ripped out violently, the spine torn. Jacob closed it, unsettled. By the 3rd day, the light began rotating on its own. That wasn't possible. The generator wasn't online. The solar panels hadn't been connected yet. There was no power, but the lantern turned, slowly, methodically, its beam scanning the ocean like a sleeping eye that twitched in its dreaming. And that night, The breathing got closer. Jacob left his door open, not out of bravery, but necessity. He had to know if someone, or something, was in the tower with him. At 3:07 a.m., he heard footsteps. Not boots, not the solid stomp of a man. These were soft, deliberate, wet, squish, drag, squish, drag. They climbed one stair, then another, then paused. Jacob held his breath, heart pounding. He reached under the bed for his flashlight and aimed it at the hallway. Nothing. But the stairs were wet. Fresh puddles trailed up toward the lantern room. He followed them with the light, one step at a time. Each stair creaked under his weight, but the lighthouse, now deathly silent, offered no other sound, no breathing, no dragging, just silence, and the low hum of something vibrating deep in the stone. The trail stopped at the top. The lantern wasn't just turning, it was spinning faster than any lighthouse beacon should. The beam flicked across the walls like lightning, and Jacob had to squint. Then he saw it in the reflection of the lens. A man. No, not a man. A figure. Drenched. Hair clinging to a pale, bloated face. Salt crystals crusted around hollow eyes. Seaweed wrapped like veins across his skin. His mouth hung open wider than any jaw should allow. And as the light hit him, it seemed to scream without sound. Jacob spun around. No one was there. Just the stairs, the fogged lens, and the scent of salt rotting into something sweet and sick. He fled, down the stairs, out of the tower, into the fog. Only there was no shore, no island. The rocks and sand were gone. Just water, endless water, and the lighthouse now stood alone, a pillar in the sea, rising from nothing, surrounded by nothing. He ran back inside, panting, heart thundering. The journal was open again, a new entry now written in fresh black ink. The light must always turn. The keeper must never leave. The sea has chosen. Jacob screamed. But the lighthouse only answered with another wet breath from the walls, and the lantern kept turning. Jacob didn't sleep after that. He barricaded the door to the keeper's quarters with a chair and a metal toolbox. He turned off every light he could, including the emergency lantern in the stairwell. But the lighthouse's eye, the one that was supposed to be dead without power, kept spinning overhead, its blinding white pulse cutting through the fog every 13 seconds. And every 13 seconds, it lit up the hallway. And every 13 seconds, he saw the shadow. It stood at the end of the corridor, not moving, just watching. Silhouetted perfectly in the beam. Too tall, too thin. Neck bent just slightly to the left, as if broken and never reset. And every 13 seconds, it vanished into the dark again. Jacob sat, curled in the corner of his room, flashlight clutched in shaking fingers, the journal on the floor in front of him. He flipped through it again, desperate for logic, for answers. But the entries had changed. They were no longer written in ink. They were written in brine. The words ran like wet algae, smeared across the page, but he could make out lines written over and over. It watches the sea, but it's always looking inward. The keeper stays. The keeper stays. The keeper stays. Then came the last page, one that hadn't existed the night before. The paper was still damp, curling at the corners. On it, scrawled in crude, jagged letters, "Blow the foghorn if you want to leave." He didn't wait. He raced down the stairs, skipping 2, sometimes 3 steps at a time, boots slipping on the damp stone. He burst through the door at the base and headed toward the supply shed where the old air compressor sat. The foghorn hadn't worked in decades, at least according to the maintenance log. But when he reached the shed, the door was open. Inside, the compressor was running. No explanation, no fuel, no electricity, yet it hummed with a low mechanical rhythm, like a deep mechanical growl, and someone had left a key on the control box, a single brass key engraved with the number 0. His hand shook as he slid the key into the switch. He hesitated, just for a moment. He didn't know why, but the hairs on his neck rose, as if something behind him, just beyond the threshold of sound, was waiting for him to turn it. He twisted the key. BWAAS map. The foghorn bellowed through the thick air like a cry from something ancient and broken. The vibration ran through his bones. The rocks trembled, and for a moment the fog seemed to peel back like skin. He saw water recede. He saw jagged stone stretch where sea should be, and far in the distance, too far for sound to carry, he saw figures, dozens, maybe more, all standing in the surf, all staring toward the lighthouse, all still. Then they stepped forward, as one. Jacob backed away. He stumbled, turned to run back up the lighthouse, only to find the path back had changed. The spiral stairs no longer climbed up. They twisted downward, far deeper than the tower should allow, carved from stone, slick with barnacles, and lined with lanterns that lit as he approached. He had no choice. The shed door slammed shut behind him, the padlock snapping back into place on its own. So he descended. The stairs grew narrower, the air wetter, and soon he realized he wasn't inside a lighthouse anymore. He was descending into the sea. There was pressure in his ears. His breath came harder, but somehow he wasn't drowning. No, he was walking, down and down, past doors sealed with rusted chains and iron latches. Some of them thudded, as if things inside paced impatiently. At last the stairs ended. A single room waited at the bottom. Inside, a desk, a chair, a mirror, and a man, wearing Jacob's uniform, sitting with his back turned. Jacob approached slowly, heart in his throat. "Hey," he began. The figure stood, turned, and it was Jacob, but drowned, bloated, pale, swollen. His eyes were gone, just dark, gaping sockets, dripping seawater. His mouth opened, and a choking, watery voice emerged. "You blew the horn." Jacob staggered back. "What are you?" "You," it said. "The next, the chosen, the one the sea kept." Jacob tried to run, but the door slammed behind him. The room filled with water, not fast, but steady, rising. The mirror showed nothing. Not his reflection, not the room, just the sea, endless, black, and waiting. The other Jacob stepped forward. Keep the light turning. Keep the breath moving. Keep the fog alive. And then, darkness. They found him 3 weeks later. The boatman who finally returned claimed he almost didn't approach the island at all. The fog was so thick, it made the compass spin in circles. But Jacob was there, alive, on the shore, eyes wide, silent, unmoving. He didn't speak for days. When he did, he whispered only one sentence, over and over, into the walls of his padded hospital room. "I'm the keeper now. I'm the keeper now. I'm the keeper now." They say the lighthouse is abandoned now, but some nights the light still turns, and if you stand at the edge of Gannett's Reach and listen closely, you might hear it, that long, low breath coming from deep beneath the sea. Story 2. The Fog Never Left the Tower. 1994. Northern coast of Scotland. Dr. Leanne Grieveson was hired by the Maritime Heritage Foundation to investigate strange fluctuations in electromagnetic fields around the old Cape Bray Lighthouse, a tower that had operated uninterrupted since 1862. It was the kind of lighthouse people only saw in paintings. Windswept cliffs, craggy rocks like broken teeth, the ocean below roaring with centuries of shipwrecks. It wasn't in use anymore, not officially, and yet the light never stopped turning. No one knew who maintained it. It wasn't connected to the national grid. The last official keeper died in 1971. But every night without fail, the beam swiveled across the horizon. The Foundation wanted answers, so they sent Leanne, along with her 2 research assistants, Ned, the quiet electronics technician, and Alia, a skeptical geology student who only joined for the academic credit. They took a helicopter to the remote isle. There was no pier, just jagged black rock and an old iron footbridge leading to the tower. Everything was damp, not from rain, but from an ever-present fog that didn't lift, even in the wind. They weren't even 2 minutes on the island before Alia muttered, "This place smells like old breath." She was right. The fog had a strange, almost organic scent. Not sea salt, not mildew, something warmer, sweeter, like something alive had been exhaling for a long, long time. They entered the tower. No graffiti, no vandalism, no rot. It looked like someone had left yesterday. The floors were clean, the staircase dustless. The oilskin coat of the last keeper still hung by the door. At the top of the spiral, the lantern room was spotless. The massive Fresnel lens gleamed, spinning with slow, mechanical precision. The rotation motor was powered by something hidden beneath the floor, something Leanne couldn't identify, even with her portable voltage reader. It wasn't electric, it wasn't wind-powered, it wasn't solar, it was just moving. "I don't like this," Ned said softly. He was staring at something on the wall, an old black-and-white photo nailed behind glass. It showed a man standing at the lantern, hand resting on the base of the lens. He wore the same oilskin that still hung downstairs. But his face, it was a blur. Not like the photo had aged. The man's body, clothing, and surroundings were clear as day. But the face was a smear of motion, like someone had violently twisted the image only in that small section, and next to it, someone had written in thin, scratched handwriting, "Fog watches." That night they tried to sleep in the living quarters 2 levels below the lantern. Leanne was the last to drift off, and the last to wake up. It was 3:41 a.m. She didn't wake because of a sound. She woke because she was cold, colder than she had ever been in her life. Her breath came in clouds. Her skin felt stiff, and the fog was inside the room, not smoke, not mist, fog, heavy, thick, breathing. She sat up, heart racing. Ned was still in his sleeping bag on the far side of the room, but Alia's bag was empty. She called for her. No answer. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The fog was denser here. It coiled around the stairs like vines. She took one cautious step at a time, rising toward the lantern. Halfway up, she heard it. Squelch, drag, squelch, drag. She turned off her flashlight and stood still. A figure passed through the mist above her. Just a blur, human-sized, moving slowly, back and forth, as if pacing in front of the lens. She called out, "Alia?" The pacing stopped. The lens above stopped turning. Then she heard Alia's voice, barely audible, from the top. "Come see." 2 words, nothing more. So calm, so utterly wrong. Leanne climbed the rest of the way, flashlight flicking back on as she neared the top. Her fingers trembled as she pushed open the lantern room's steel door. It was empty. No Alia, just the spinning lens, slowly revving up again. But something was different. There was moisture on the glass. Fingerprints, long smeared, dragged streaks, as if someone had been pressing against it from the outside. Ned called out from below. "Leanne!" She bolted down. When she reached the living quarters, Ned was standing in the doorway, pale as salt. He pointed wordlessly. On the wall, in dripping letters that hadn't been there moments before, someone had written, "The fog never left the tower." and underneath it, in smaller, barely legible script, "You shouldn't have come here to study me." That night, Leanne couldn't sleep. Neither could Ned. And Alia? She didn't return. Not that night. Not the next. Not ever. And yet, as the lantern spun overhead, they sometimes caught her silhouette in the glass. Just a shadow of a girl, standing behind the lens, mouth open, breathing. Leanne didn't want to say it out loud, but Ned finally did. "She's still here." It had been 3 days since Alia vanished. They hadn't called for help. There was no signal. The Foundation's emergency radio only buzzed with static, even on open channels. The fog grew thicker with each passing hour, sealing them in a damp white tomb. The bridge they crossed to reach the island. Gone. Vanished beneath the mist. The cliff edge looked like it ended in nothing now. And still, the lighthouse lens kept spinning. They heard her at night. Alia, in the walls, sometimes it was humming. A low, tuneless vibration that rose from the stone. Sometimes it was breathing, raspy, struggling, as if someone were exhaling sea air through cracked ribs. Once, she whispered Ned's name behind his ear. He ran down to the generator room and didn't come back up for hours. Leanne was losing her grip. Her journal entries had become short, frantic, scribbled lines repeating questions over and over. Why is it breathing? Why does it need a keeper? Who is it watching for? That night they both saw it. The fog lifted, just for a moment. They were on the lower floor, standing in the stairwell, when the light beam passed the window and revealed something outside, standing just beyond the tower. Dozens of figures, silhouettes in the mist, staring at the lighthouse, not moving, not blinking. Their mouths were wide open, too wide, unnaturally wide, and they weren't breathing. They were inhaling, pulling the fog inward, feeding on it, or feeding it. The lens passed. The figures vanished into white. Ned didn't move for hours. Eventually he said, "I think she was taken because she didn't believe." Leanne turned. "What?" She mocked it. She said the fog smelled like breath. She said the light should have stopped. She doubted it. That's why it took her. Leanne didn't respond, because she'd mocked it too. The next morning she woke up to find Ned gone. Only his boots remained, drenched in salt water and facing the stairs. She searched every floor. Only one place left, the lantern. She climbed, flashlight trembling in her hand. Each step felt heavier than the last. The tower groaned around her, not from wind, but from something deeper, something inside the stone. She reached the top. The lantern spun, and behind the lens, a face. Not Alia, not Ned, someone else. Skin stretched thin like wet cloth, hair matted with rot. The eyes were deep black pits, but something shimmered inside, like stars drowned beneath 1,000 fathoms. The mouth opened, and it spoke. "You stayed, you see. You're next." Leanne turned and fled. But the stairs never ended. She descended floor after floor, but the bottom never came. The walls grew slick. Barnacles began to cluster on the stone. Seaweed draped from the ceiling. Her boots splashed in rising water. She was below the ocean, but the air remained, and so did the fog. Finally she reached a room, round, like a second lantern room, but submerged. There were no lights, only fog, thick, endless fog churning inside the walls, like a living thing trapped behind glass. And there, inside the fog, Alia, eyes wide, mouth open, hands pressed to the glass, screaming silently, and beside her, Ned and others, keepers, assistants, researchers, all staring, all frozen, all mouthing the same phrase over and over, lips moving in silent rhythm. The fog never left the tower. Leanne screamed. The fog answered. It reached through the wall like a hand, shaped in vapor, but stronger than steel. It wrapped around her throat, lifted her, pulled her toward the glass. And just before she passed through, she saw it. The real lens. It wasn't the one spinning above. It was this chamber, the fog. The tower wasn't a beacon. It was a mouth, and it had been calling. It needed keepers, breathers, witnesses. The last thing she heard before she passed through the glass was her own voice, already inside the chamber, whispering from within, "You shouldn't have come to study me." 3 weeks later, the Maritime Heritage Foundation received an anonymous package. Inside, Leanne's journal, soaked and warped, the ink bleeding in thick blue veins. The last page was fresh, somehow written after the rest had decayed. It read, "Fog watches, fog listens, fog feeds. If you ever see the light turn in the distance, don't blink, don't breathe, don't answer." Story 3, the final transmission from Station Wraith. They called it Station Wraith. Officially it was known as USCG Lighthouse Facility 63A, decommissioned in 1989 and left to rust on the edge of a cliff in the Bering Sea. But among coastal ham operators and shortwave fanatics, the place had a different reputation, one whispered about on midnight forums and pirate radio waves. In 1983, a transmission was allegedly picked up from that lighthouse, a scrambled, time-skipping broadcast that included screams, numbers, and what sounded like Morse code in reverse. No one could confirm it until a week ago. Derek, co-host of the cult horror podcast Dead Airwaves, got an email, no name, no subject line, just a .wav file. He played it live on their Patreon bonus episode. It started normal, static, a low hum. Then came the message, "Station Wraith. This is Wraith. I can't see the stars anymore. They're inside. Not human, not light. If you hear this, don't look at the tower." Then came the screams. Then the sound of the foghorn, played backward. The file corrupted seconds later. Derek and his co-host Jules were hooked. 3 days later, they flew with sound engineer Kenzie to Anchorage. Then a puddle jumper to Unalaska. Then a supply boat, bribed with $800 cash, to take them across frigid black water toward the cliffs of Station Wraith. The lighthouse was still there, tall, gray, brutalist, more like a missile silo than a maritime beacon. Its base was fortified with rusted steel doors, chains wrapped around the lower levels. And as the boat drifted close, the sky grew unnaturally dim, even though it was 3 p.m. Fog rolled in sideways across the sea. Derek grinned. "Hell yeah, this is exactly the energy I wanted." The boat refused to dock, so they leapt from the edge onto the rocks and climbed up the broken concrete steps. Kenzie had to sling her audio rig onto her back while gripping the icy railing. The air was too still. No wind, no birds, just the dull hum of the ocean. And something else. A low frequency, barely audible, almost a vibration in their teeth more than in their ears. The lighthouse door opened too easily. No rust, no resistance. Inside, the walls were covered with dense insulation, like a recording studio. Strange for a lighthouse, but not if it used to transmit military signals. The upper stairwell had reel-to-reel decks, tangled cables, rotted plastic dials. Kenzie's EM mic pinged. There was still power. Jules laughed nervously. "You guys sure this isn't just an elaborate numbers station?" Derek grinned wider. "I hope it is." They split up. Kenzie stayed below to wire mics and record ambient sound. Jules went to check the power relays on the middle floor. Derek climbed to the top. The final stairwell was painted black. No markings, no signage. But as he reached the last step, he saw it. An old airlock-style door with a shattered viewing window. Beyond it, The lantern room. But it wasn't a lantern anymore. Not really. It had a dish, an array of jagged antennae and hanging glass prisms that spun slowly in silence. It looked like a sculpture made from radio bones, angled to catch frequencies not meant for human ears. In the center, a chair, empty, straps on the arms, a microphone mounted at mouth level, covered in what looked like crystallized salt, and on the wall behind it, a faded stencil painted in Cold War red. Do not transmit if they've already arrived. Derek shuddered. That he didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in fear, and this place had more of it than any haunted house he'd ever stepped into. He set up his portable recorder, pressed record, introduced himself. This is Derek from Dead Airwaves. I'm sitting in the mouth of Station Wraith, where a transmission was allegedly sent by someone who was either losing their mind or describing something humanity was never meant to hear. He paused. Behind him, something tapped the window. Not wind, not rock, knuckles, deliberate. He turned. The viewing glass was intact again, but it didn't reflect his face. It reflected someone else's, a figure, tall, drenched, skin pulled tight over a face that didn't seem to have eyes. Its mouth opened, impossibly wide, and whispered something. Derek didn't hear it in his ears. He heard it in his bones. Repeat the message. His recorder clicked off. So did his flashlight. Below, Kenzie was watching the EM levels spike. The signal was back. A looped transmission, bleeding through the cables. I am not the light. I am the one who listens when stars forget you. The tower is open. The tower is breathing. She tried to shut it down, but the knobs moved on their own, and the reel-to-reel began to spin backward. On the static channel, a voice emerged. Jules, screaming, then silence, then a new voice, low, distorted, something that used her tone but not her words. It whispered, "Only one of you leaves. Choose." Kenzie grabbed her gear and ran up the stairs, 2 at a time. At the top, the door to the lantern was gone. Just a tunnel of light, and inside it, the shadow of Derek, standing still, arms at his sides, mouth open, repeating one phrase over and over. Do not transmit if they've already arrived. Kenzie didn't call out for Derek. She wanted to, but something deep inside her, some primal piece of instinct not dulled by reason, told her, don't make a sound. He was standing in front of the antenna array like a man hypnotized by a god. His head twitched occasionally, like a radio trying to adjust its frequency. The flashlight in her hand began to flicker, even though the batteries were fresh. Then Derek spoke. Not to her. Not even to the room. He was speaking into the signal. They're inside the light. Not of this world. They arrived through the mirrors. The broadcast was a call. We answered. Now they know where we are. His voice wasn't his voice anymore. It layered, glitched, stuttered, as if two people were speaking over each other, but one of them wasn't human. Kenzie backed down the stairs, slowly, and that's when she noticed the change. There were more steps than before. The lighthouse only had 5 floors. She was now on the 12th. Every floor she descended was colder, covered in a new kind of dust, ash-gray, and humming with static. And each door she passed had the same word carved into the steel in jagged gouges, ECHO. Her recorder was still running. The waveform was flat, silent, but the file size kept increasing. That meant it was picking up something. She descended another flight. She saw Jules, but Jules didn't see her. He stood in a cell-like room surrounded by broken mirrors, whispering into a shattered ham radio. We're not broadcasting anymore. We're receiving. I saw my reflection blink when I didn't. I heard my voice before I spoke. We are on the wrong side of the message. Kenzie reached for him. But as soon as her fingers passed through the doorway, Jules vanished. No sound, no scream, just gone. And the door now said something else. Transmitted, she screamed, and that was a mistake. The light in the stairwell shifted instantly, no longer flickering, now pulsing, like a heartbeat. Something began moving above her, something heavy, wet, metallic, and hungry. She didn't look up. She ran, floor after floor, until she reached the base. The tower had changed. It wasn't concrete anymore. It was bone, not clean ivory, but fused, blackened, pulsing like a spine hooked to a power grid. The air was thick with static and fog that reeked of burnt teeth. The signal came through again, louder, clearer than ever, through every wall, every wire. Do not transmit if they've already arrived. You have transmitted. You have called them. They are here. They are inside. Kenzie collapsed to her knees. Her headphones were melting, literally, plastic dripping onto the floor. She looked up and saw them, the echoes. They weren't ghosts. They weren't aliens. They were reflections, shadow versions of herself. Derek, Jules, blurry outlines with mouths wide open, teeth too long, eyes static-filled. Each one made from light, from the signal, from her. They circled her like sharks. Then one stepped forward. It looked like Derek, but not. Taller, limbs too smooth, mouth hanging open like a glitch in space. It whispered. Record. Kenzie screamed as it lunged, cut to black. 3 months later, a Coast Guard training vessel docked near the ruins of Station Wraith. No structure remained, just foundation. It burned, melted, and yet. A recorder was found, sitting atop the rocks, fully intact. It contained one file, titled simply Echo.Wave. It played once on a looped pirate broadcast out of the Philippines. Then the feed went dead. Those who heard it say it was less of a sound and more of a command, a voice whispering from within your own voice. We are already in your signal. You will record us. You will carry us. You will become the tower. The host of dead airwaves was never seen again, but some say, if you scan AM frequencies late at night, near water, you'll hear it. The Wraith transmission, a voice that sounds a lot like Derek, calling into the dark. Do not transmit if they've already arrived, but if you're hearing this, it's too late. So, still think lighthouses are just cozy relics of the past, from a keeper who was chosen by the sea, to fog that remembers the names of those who vanish inside it, to a signal that spreads like a virus through your own voice. These stories remind us of one terrifying truth. Some lights aren't meant to guide you home. They're meant to keep you from leaving. If you made it this far, congratulations. Most don't. But before you go, remember, leave the light on tonight, just in case. And if you ever hear a voice in the static, don't respond. If you enjoyed this descent into darkness, hit like, drop a comment telling us which story disturbed you most, and subscribe so you never miss another terrifying tale. And if you're feeling especially brave, share this video with someone who hates the ocean. We'll see you next time. Or maybe you'll hear us first.